Welcome to the School of Laughs podcast, brought to you by schooloflaughs.com. Whether you're an aspiring comedian, a part-time pro, or a speaker who wants to become funnier, this is the podcast for you. We'll break down tools, tips, and techniques to help you get bigger, better, and more bookable. And now, here's the show.
Welcome to the podcast. Rick Roberts here today. I can't wait for you to meet my buddy Dan Rupple. Dan is a CEO of Master Media out there in Hollywood, California. We'll talk about that. He's got some great stories about Bob Barker. He's got some great stories about Carol Burnett. Got some great stories about David Letterman. I don't even know how I can top this episode, so I'm just not even going to try. This might be the last one ever. He is great. You know, I usually edit these things down to 32 minutes or something like that. But you're going to listen to this to work and on your way back home, because I let the whole hour roll with Dan Rupple because there's just a lot of good gold nuggets in here. He's an aged sage, and he's got some wisdom that I want you all to glean, because I certainly did. I would like to thank our Patreon sponsor for this episode, Shell Baxter. Shell, thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. I know you've listened for a long time, and I've enjoyed getting to know you over these several classes here that we've taken in the past few months. Online, virtual, fun stuff. You and your group were a lot of fun to hang out with. So super stoked that you're sponsoring the podcast, and thank you for that. If you'd like to sponsor the podcast, and basically what that is, you can jump on Patreon through School of Laughs /Patreon, learn all about it. You can pledge one time, hey, I like your podcast, here's $5, go get you some coffee, or you could be an ongoing sponsor of the podcast, and by doing that at the $7 a month level or higher, you get involved with Club 52, which is kind of a weekly class. You get a short little email with one actionable tip that helps you get bigger, better, and more bookable. And who doesn't want to do that, especially and even though we're in these COVID times? By the way, hope you're healthy wherever you're at and staying safe out there. All right, let's get into this episode with Dan Rupple. And by the way, Dan and I share a certain similarities in the beginning of our comedy careers. We both were part of improv groups. Mine was called Midwest Comedy Tool and Die, and we toured the Midwest and sometimes the Southeast. Dan was in a group called Isaac Air Freight, which started out doing comedy in the LA area and then made a transformation into clean Christian comedy, and they would open for huge concerts. They were the biggest thing going for a while. So I'll link to some of their stuff in the show notes too, but we'll talk about that and a whole lot more right now with Dan Rupple. Well, I do have on the line today Dan Rupple. How's it going, sir?
Sir, Rick, come on. How formal. How formal. Is that a Southern thing or a kind of a respectful thing? Okay. I think what it is really, Rick, I think it's just a very polite way of saying you're old.
Well, I'm joining that group now, man.
You are officially a veteran, and that brings with it some real wonderful lessons you've learned. And I've listened to your podcast, and you're doing just a terrific job.
Oh, thanks. Well, you know, I like to kind of dig into like backstories and kind of learn about people. And the great thing about this downtime that a lot of people have with COVID is I'm able to grab a few people I normally wouldn't be able to grab a hold of. And I've been thinking about you for the podcast for a long time. And I know you from like 2008 on, but I always hear these stories about how you got started, and the stuff you did with Isaac Air Freight is fascinating to me. So for people who are listening for the first time, they have no idea who Dan Rupple is besides what I told them in the intro. Tell me how you got involved with doing some comedy and ultimately joining Isaac Air Freight and just launching that big thing.
Right. Well, I'm going to go back for just a second, all the way till I was 5 years old. When I was 5, I saw the Dick Van Dyke Show. And right then I had my life's aspirations. I mean, I had it all planned out. I said, I want to work in comedy like Rob Petrie. I want to work in television like Rob Petrie. And I want to have a perky brunette wife like Laura Petrie, who, if you know Peggy, she's a perky brunette. And the Lord's been so gracious to me because I've been able to do all three. But I started right then as a real love for comedy. And I knew I had a natural aptitude. My brother was 5.5 years older, and he would hang out with his buddies and when we were kids. And at first, his friends didn't want the runt little, little brother to tag along. But then they discovered, hey, your brother's really funny. He's funny. Bring him along. And they would ask for me to join him just because I was funny. So I learned real early on. I had a real aptitude. But where it really began was in high school. When I started high school, I took theater arts, and they introduced me to comedy improv. And it was like a revelation. My head was ready to explode. It's like, whoa, you get up on stage and you just make stuff up and people laugh. That's awesome. That was so cool. So what we did is they, in the drama department, they had auditions, and we formed I think it was about a 12-person troupe. And we did, comedy improv nights in the theater department there. And it went over really well. And I got this crazy idea. And I was only 15 at the time, Rick. I was a kid. And I said, why don't we kind of form a group? And so I picked the four, including me, 5, players. And we formed a group. And we started doing local little events and like high school assemblies and things like that. And then I got really bold. I heard that this place called the Comedy Store had just opened on Sunset Boulevard, and they had open mic nights. And now, again, I'm 15.
Right.
And I said, hey, let's go up there. After the school bell rings, let's drive up to Hollywood. It was only about 40 minutes away from where I lived. And we went up there and signed in for the open mic. And they would card us, because they served liquor there. And of course, I was just a 15-year-old kid. And, it was really funny. I never got caught for my age, being underage, except one time at the Comedy Store. And they said, I'll tell you what, you can still go on, but you have to go through this back door. You have to climb through the bushes. And then you have to go in this back door that goes directly to the stage, do your set, and then exit that same way and never walk into the bar area. So I did that. But anyway, that went on for a number of years, all the way into my college years. And we were starting to get really a following. And we were opening for Lily Tomlin. And we were performing with a lot of guys who went on to Saturday Night Live. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you know this story, Rick. I don't know if I've ever told you, but in 1975, Lorne Michaels was getting ready to put a show together called SNL, Saturday Night Live. And he sent a team of scouts out to California to go through the comedy clubs and try to find the best sketch groups. And they narrowed it down to 2 groups, my group and Al Franken and Tom Davis. And they chose Al Franken and Tom Davis very wisely. They were older than us. They were better than us. But still, it was an honor to be on that short list for the very first cast of Saturday Night Live. And so anyway, we just continued to do shows and, more and more different clubs and stuff. And then in 1977, I was alone in my bedroom, and I just kind of heard this inner voice saying, read your Bible. I had been on kind of a spiritual quest, Rick. I kind of trying to figure out what life was all about, who this Jesus was. And I had been looking into different forms of spirituality, but I heard this kind of voice saying, read your Bible. And I had a Bible because my parents almost at gunpoint made me go to VBS when I was a kid.
Right.
And so anyway, but the only thing I remember about VBS was in the Bible was the red stuff was Jesus. So I looked for the most red stuff I could find, and that was the Sermon on the Mount. And so I read the very first line. It says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And I just came undone. I just literally fell on the floor convulsing in tears. And I said, God, I don't totally know what this is all about, but whatever it is, I want it. I think I'm bankrupt in my soul. And I received the Lord that night. And now I had a little bit of a problem because I was in this comedy group that we were doing kind of blue humor, of course, in the clubs. And it wasn't conducive to my newfound faith. So I show up at rehearsal. And this is where the hand of God, the miracle of it was. I show up to rehearsal, and we were a 3-man group at that time. And I told my guys, I said, I just received the Lord. I'm a Christian now, and I can't continue with the group. I'm going to leave the group tonight. And I turned to my one partner, Dave, and he says, last week I received the Lord, and I was going to leave the group tonight. And then I turned to my third partner, Larry, and he said, last week I rededicated my life to Christ, and I was going to leave the group. And we said, wait a minute, maybe we can do this as Christians. And that was really how what we call now Christian comedy was kind of birthed in my little rundown rental house there. And we wrote our first record probably within about a month. I was a baby Christian, and we wrote it really quickly. We did a few shows at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, which was just the flashpoint of the Jesus movement and Jesus music way back then. We were opening for Keith Green, and it just kind of exploded. And pretty soon we're touring all over the country. Our first record came out. They said, we'll be so happy if it sells 10,000 copies. It sold, our first record sold about 150,000. We went on to sell about 500,000 records. And in those days, that was a lot of records.
Yeah.
If you sold 30,000, it was kind of like platinum in those days, so for Christian stuff. And anyway, that's what happened.
That's awesome. It's funny. I started out with an improv comedy group too in 1990. And as we got into the clubs, the shows got bluer and bluer. And then eventually I kind of rededicated myself, and I told the guys, and none of them went on board with me. They all kept doing what they were doing. So I kind of leaned more towards my stand-up.
Is that when you decided to move from sketch or improv to stand-up?
Yeah, it was more, I was doing a little bit of both, because when we would do the shows at the comedy club, there still needed to be an MC, and nobody wanted, they didn't have the budget. We kind of took the budget from the headliner, feature, and MC and dispersed it among the 5 of us that traveled. But I quickly learned that if I went up and emceed 5 or 10 minutes, that everything I did in the improv show would be a little bit funnier because they got to know me already. And then I got to get in front of different club owners and managers, and they said, hey, come back on your own sometime. And I started building up my stand-up simultaneously. But after about 7 or 8 years with the group, financially it was more smart for me to go do stand-up on my own. And then just content-wise, even though improv is so fun, and I love the freedom of just listening and responding as opposed to preparing, I decided to kind of dedicate to stand-up straight up, probably in 99. So,
well, you bring up a real good point, and it's one of the real key rules of comedy. You talked about how they got to know you, so they received your sketch or improv a little bit, better. And that is so true, because we had the added benefit of our albums preceded us. So when we went to a city and did a show, they already knew us from the album. So they came in liking us. And likability is key. Comedy is an element of play. It's like when we're little kids, we go over to our buddy's house and we say, hey, can you come out and play? And then we play cops and robbers or something. We shoot each other and you do a big dying scene. And, that's your way of playing, where no one gets hurt, but you're just playing. And that's what an audience does with a comedian. They're playing. It's a volley. I throw out a joke and you laugh back, and it comes back and forth. And if you don't like someone, it's hard to laugh with them. So, if somebody gets up on the stage and you just don't like them, you're not very apt to laugh with them.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of good stuff in there for sure. As a performer, I think all the guys in our group didn't want to go out and do the unfunny stuff of doing the announcements and all those things. But I'm like, you know what? There's no pressure on that guy to be funny. So I would kind of win him over slowly, do 4 or 5 minutes of material, and then introduce the group. And like you say, they already knew me a little bit. So everybody else was a stranger after me. I was kind of the guy that they could go to if nothing else was working in their mind. Like, that guy, we know him already.
Absolutely. I think they're missing a real strong element to not meet the audience or get to know, warm themselves up to the audience.
Now, I want to get into a couple of your television things that I really just know of, but don't know the stories behind them. So first off, let's talk about The Price is Right. So was it an executive producer or a supervising producer? So tell us kind of what the roles are in a TV show, because I'm kind of learning this as I go as well. But so the supervising producer does what?
Well, let me go back a step. In television, in film too, there's what they call above the line and below the line. And above the line is, we'll say, the creative or business elements. It's the executive producer who is primarily trying to cut the deal for distribution or money raising or those sorts of things. There's the producer who is just overseeing, everything. They're usually hiring the director with the director's counsel. They're casting. They're putting all the pieces together. Then there's various associate directors or producers, but then there's your creative elements, your director, your writer, your actors, your set designers, your art directors, your production design, editors, that sort of thing. Okay, then there's the below the line, which is your technical crew. It's your lighting, it's your cameraman, it's your makeup, hair, costuming, it's all those other departments, what they call below the line. So getting back to your original question, what does a supervising producer do? They supervise the production, meaning primarily the below the line, the production elements, but they also, I was the go-between between the above the line and the below the line. I was kind of, I would sit in those meetings on The Price is Right with Bob Barker and the producers and the director. And we would talk about what this show was going to be, which games were going to be played, what the prizes were. And then I would say, okay, that affects our cameraman this way, or, the editing is going to be this way, so that's really what you do.
Gotcha. And how long did you do that for?
10 years. And it was such a joy. I'm still family with, I had 100 people on the crew under me. And I'm still kind of family with all of them. When you work every day on a show for 10 years, you see, people are having babies, people getting married. Sadly, people are getting divorces. You go through all the ups and downs of life together. And you really, get real close to each other. And I want to mention something. When I came into Price is Right, the Lord told me day one, have a touch point with every single person under, your supervision every single day. And that means from Bob Barker all the way down to, an usher who brings in the audience, And I did that. Every day. In fact, I used to make fun of me because I would do this every single morning. I'd come into the studio and I would walk counterclockwise around the entire studio. And I would just, sometimes it would just be, hey, how you doing today? But other times it'd be, hey, did your son win his Little League game last night? Or, I just heard your wife is struggling with cancer or something. I would just show that I saw them, I cared, that they were of value to the production. And what happened was it just became a really, just a wonderful climate, where people enjoyed coming to work. It was just a real wonderful atmosphere to do production. And production's hard work. And if you're having a good time with friends, it makes it so much better. But I tell you that, Rick, not because I'm such this great guy, but it was kind of the formula that got me Letterman. 3 years later, I'd been doing Price is Right for about 3 years, and David Letterman, left the late night at NBC and signed on to do the Late Show for CBS. And he was in New York, of course, at the Ed Sullivan Theater. And he sent a couple of his producers out and to where I worked at Television City in LA, and said, Dave wants to do a couple weeks of shows in LA. And, here's the dates he wants to do. We need a studio, obviously. And they said, and we would like Dan Rupple to be the supervising producer. And my boss said, how do you even know him? I'd only been there 3 years. There were other guys in my department that had been there for 20 or 30 years. And they said, well, we heard that his crews are it's really a nice atmosphere on his set. And so that's how I got Letterman. And it was oh man, as a comedian, it was a kid in a candy store to be working with, Letterman, And so it was such a joy when he would come out and we'd do the shows. And I was able to go out on all of his interstitials. He would do like an interstitial is a roll-in video, like he would send Rupert out from Hello Delhi, and I would do all those with Rupert. In fact, just a side note, I'm still very close friends with Rupert today.
How's he doing? Every once in a while I wonder about him.
He's still there at the Hello Delhi. It's outside of the Ed Sullivan Theater still, where Stephen Colbert does his show. But, I have lunch with him, stop there every time I'm in New York. But I was able to do that. I was able to do some of the funnest things with Dave. He would... One time, I got a call from the producer, and he said, hey, we need, tomorrow morning, by 7 a.m., we need 3,000 Taco Bell tacos. And I said, okay. So I call up all these Taco Bells. And I said, I called 3 different ones. And I said, I need 1,000 tacos at 7 a.m. And of course, they said, no way, we don't open till 10, and there's no way we're going to try to get 3,000 tacos. And I said, it's for David Letterman. Oh, okay. And suddenly they were all on board. So what we did is Dave loaded the back of a convertible with tacos, and he got a bullhorn. He drove up and down the residential streets of Beverly Hills. And he would say, get your dog. And he would throw tacos on their lawns like you would a newspaper, So we did all sorts of things like that were so fun. I mean, we just had a blast. And so anyway, I just had a great time. I did a number of weeks in LA. I did shows for Dave in San Francisco. I also did a lot of roll-ins without Dave that we would do celebrities here in Hollywood, that they would roll in the show. And anyway, it was a fun, 8 or 9 years with Dave.
Oh man, I remember so many of those little side things he would do. When you're talking about Taco Bell, it reminded me he would go through he would have somebody go through a drive-through, and he would be on the little earpiece telling them what to say, which is 100% what the Impractical Jokers are doing today. Basically somebody feeding them the lines and they have to say it, but those always cracked me up.
Yeah. He is, I shouldn't say was, he still is. He is so quick and so brilliant, so smart. It's just amazing how quick he is.
Have you seen any of his new series on Netflix?
Yeah, I love him.
Yeah, he's definitely got the more time, and I just like his intuitiveness, and there's so few shows where the interviewee gets to say what they're trying to say in its entirety before being interrupted by somebody. And he doesn't interrupt. He hears it and has a follow-up question almost every time.
That's the most important thing of interviewing. And I used to teach at Biola University. I used to teach comedy writing, and then I would teach intro to the major, to the film and television major. And sometimes they would talk about, well, I'm going to do an interview show. And one of you can always tell a rookie interviewer by that they're not listening. They are so married to the next question that they ask a question, and then while the person's answering it, they're reading what the next question is. Well, what happens when you do that is you are missing what they might be answering that might be really intriguing. You'll ask somebody like, well, how'd you get started in comedy? And then they say, well, actually, I found the cure for cancer. And then you go, so what was your first gig? It's right. Like, wait a minute. He just told you he found the cure to cancer. Follow up on it.
And, I think, too, when you ask a question, especially your very first question of an interview, if you listen close, you'll hear what the guest really wants to tell you anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they almost have the reverse happen sometimes. Like, I've got to promote this, or I've got to say this, or this is what's funny to me. But if you don't lead them into it, they're going to get there no matter what.
Right. Well, it's interesting you say that, because I learned really early on how to control an interview. Now, I don't have to do with you, Rick. First of all, you're a friend. And second of all, you have a real natural ability to just have a conversation. You know, I don't feel when I listen to your podcast or what we're doing right now, or when I've also talked to you at other times, that it's a forced scripted thing. We're just talking. But what I found early on with Isaac Air Freight, you know, whenever we'd go into a town, they'd have us on the local radio station. Of course, this is way before social media and podcasts, et cetera. But they'd always have us on the radio. And many of these smaller radio stations, the radio host was a real novice or real inexperienced. And in fact, I remember one time, the person goes, "We have here in the studio Isaac Air Freight, and tell us about yourself." And so we kind of tell him a little bit about ourselves. And then this is what he said. He goes, "Talk more." And so, well, we did this and this and this. Talk more. And that's all he did. Talk more or keep going, or, you know, he never asked another question. So you learn really early on, you have to kind of control the conversation and take it where you need it to go to communicate. Now, I don't have anything to push, you know, I don't have a new CD, I don't have a show, but, you know, you need to kind of get in what you need to talk about and really, because sometimes, sometimes it's not that they're inexperienced as an interviewer. Sometimes it's just they don't know what is really important. And like you said, the interviewee will bring up what's really the important part. You know, it's like, you asked about this, but the real important part is this part.
Right. And did you find too, because we had this problem with our group, we were a troop of 5 guys. We go into a radio station. They never had 5 comedians in a room. They've only got 2 mics at best on the other side of the desk, but they would not even know how to pair us up. So they would be looking at one person, trying to get a question to the other person. We just kind of learned over time to give them one question to ask us, and we would take it from there. And especially promoting a comedy show, we would have to get right into a bit and just let them react instead of trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was easier for us. We were together for 15 years. As Isaac Air Freight. The last 7 or 8 years, it was a 2-man group. So that made it very easy.
Gotcha. I wanted to hear a story, just maybe something Bob Barker either said to you or you noticed just from observing him that left an impression on you over, you know, even today, when you think of Bob Barker, you kind of think of this phrase or this action that he took.
Well, first of all, he is so brilliant. People sometimes make fun of game show hosts. It's like they're the, you know, game show host is like the bottom feeder of the talent chain. You know, it is so hard. It is such a hard job. And watching, I produced probably like 1,400 shows. And to see him do that many hours of television, and very rarely was there an edit. I mean, he just did not make mistakes. In fact, we would do little promos where he had to give all this verbiage in 30 seconds, and they didn't even have to put a clock on him. He would just boom. He would end it at 29 seconds.
Wow!
It's like he had this internal clock. But what is so amazing about him is, everybody knows The Price is Right. Okay. Here's what he's got to do in about, I don't know what the clock would be, somewhere between 20 and 30 seconds. There's a guy in Bitters Row. He's the closest to the thing, so he gets to come up on stage. Okay. In the time that guy comes up on stage, Bob Barker has to somehow have a touch point with that contestant. He has to pull something out of him or her that will endear that contestant to the audience, because they got to be rooting for him. Then he's got to explain the rules of the game they're going to play. Then he has to pitch it to the product, you know, the gift, you know, the prize, whatever it is, the announcer. He's got to do all those elements in about 20 to 30 seconds. And he's the master. You know, Alex Trebek, who just passed away, he was another master. Being a game show host at the network level is hard work. And Barker was just so brilliant at it. On more of a personal level, Barker, if he respected you, he was great. He was really he was in your corner. If he didn't suffer fools lightly. He would just he wasn't mean.
Right.
He just didn't really want to have much to do with you if he didn't respect you. I was very fortunate. From day one, he respected me. And as a matter of fact, whenever there was some negative news that we had to tell Barker, like he asked for something, but we couldn't get it, they would always ask me to tell him. He goes, he likes you, Dan, you tell him. So, but I had a very good relationship with him. He was very kind to me. As you probably know, Rick, my wife Peggy has many bouts with cancer. And every time she was hospitalized, he was the first one to send flowers. David Letterman was too. David Letterman would send flowers. In fact, it was kind of humorous. She had to have a major cancer surgery at UCLA Medical Center. And the first two bouquets of flowers that arrived, one was from Bob Barker and one was from David Letterman. And so all the nurses thought we were rock stars,
Right.
It's like, no, we're just average Joes, but no, Barker was really, really kind to me. And anyway, I have nothing but fondness for him.
They probably thought Peggy was a star that they didn't somehow flew under the radar. Like, this lady must be super famous.
Getting back to Letterman, Dave has a bad back. And before every show, he would have a masseuse in his dressing room who would work on his back to loosen him up enough. But he would, if you watch some old reruns, if a guest comes to hug him, he will grab their hands and hold them down at their sides. That's how he greets them. He rarely did someone beat him to get a hug in, because that is I think it's how he injured his back. But I might be wrong in that, but I do know that it would always cause more pain for him. So he wasn't a hugger, and he would do that to alleviate the pain.
Interesting. Hey,
here's another thing, Rick.
Please.
You've been in New York in the summer, like August. It's hot. The cameraman at the Ed Sullivan Theater would wear they would wear heavy winter jackets in August, because Dave Letterman liked to have it 39 degrees in the studio. There's something about him. And if you watch old reruns of the Late Show, while the credits are rolling, at the end, as soon as he says, "Good night, everybody," he stands up, takes his coat off. It's 39 degrees in the Ed Sullivan Theater, but he's freezing, or he's so hot. He gets so hot. Now, cut to San Francisco. I was doing shows at the Palace of the Fine Arts. We're doing it in February. The Palace of the Fine Arts in San Francisco is right on the shore of San Francisco Bay. You feel like you can reach out and touch the Golden Gate Bridge. So they're famous for winds, cold winds in February. Now, the Palace of Fine Arts is just a shell of a building. It doesn't have a light grid. It doesn't have any kind of air conditioning. But I thought, no problem. It's on the bay, and in February. So I hired a air conditioning company to snorkel the building with just a little bit of air conditioning, because I knew Dave wanted it 39 degrees. So anyway, they come out. It's 81 degrees that week and no wind in San Francisco in February. Okay, it's an oven in the theater. So I call the air conditioning company and I say, "Hey, you've got two snorkels going." The building looked like an octopus. Uh-huh. It had two snorkels. I said, we need like 5 more, snorkels. We got to just pump as much cold air into this thing as we can. So we did, and they were just doing it, and they got it down to about 49. And I have to walk into Dave's dressing room, and I said, "Dave, I'm really sorry. It's 81 degrees out. and the lowest I could get it is 49. And I'm kind of, biting my lip. It's like, oh, is he going to be really mad or disappointed at me? And he was. He goes, oh, hey, thanks so much. That's a good job. That'll be fine. Thank you. He was great about it. But it was like, oh man, dodged a bullet there.
Yeah.
You always give the star what they want.
Yeah, and I always heard that the cold theater kept audiences on their edge. It kept them attentive, and probably to a point in those days, the equipment was pretty hot and the lights and stuff. So that was probably the other part of it.
Before digital cameras, they had to really have hot lights on. So absolutely.
And you said Palace of Fine Arts. I found myself when I heard you say that, I'm like, I don't know if I could say that without reversing it and probably really embarrassing myself. Today you're doing different stuff. You're a CEO of Master Media. And I just kind of want you to tell people what that is and what you do now, because I've found that over the years, everything that you've done in the past prepares you for the next thing, whether you know what that next thing is or not. So what is it that you're doing now, and how is that drawing upon the skills that you developed earlier on?
I am so grateful to the Lord right now that I get to do what I do, because it touches on every skill that I have and every experience I've learned from. It's kind of the culmination of what I'm doing now. Master Media, it's 35 years old. It was founded in 1985. The founder, Dr. Larry Polin, retired 5 years ago, and I came in as the new CEO. And what Master Media is, it's a Christian outreach to the mainstream media world. We serve as we call it serving as a trusted voice of faith to the media leaders and cultural influences in the entertainment industry. And what that means is we form relationships with all the studio heads, the network presidents, the heads of all the streaming platforms now. We form relationship where they can really hear what the concerns or the uniquenesses are of the Christian audience. And then we also, as we do form more and more of a trusted relationship, they open up personally to us, and we ask if we can pray for them. And we never leave an office without asking to pray for them, and no one's ever turned us down. As a matter of fact, sometimes the higher they are in position-wise in the industry, the more they covet prayers. And I think it's so important, the kind of work we do, because, see, right now, the industry is a lot different than it was when I first started in it, of course. When I first started, there were 6 film studios, there were 3 TV networks, and of course, there's no online anything. So if you could go around to those 9 heads of studios and networks and form relationship, you really kind of canvass the entire media spectrum. Well, today there's thousands with all the digital platforms, the cable platforms, the streaming platforms, everything. And so the audience is fragmented. Back in the day, a show like Bonanza could get 60 to 80 million viewers. Now, if you get 1 million viewers on a cable show, man, that's a big show. You've done really well because the audience is fragmented. So what that means is all the different communities in America, they are trying to catch the ear of those different studio leaders to say, hey, represent my community on your shows because we have a big audience. And whoever is maybe sometimes loudest in those rooms is the community that gets represented. And very often the missing community is the Christian community. And we're the largest community in America. And depending on how you define a Christian, but we're probably 2/3 of America, and so that's what we do as Master Media. We have relationships. I have a team in New Hollywood, team in New York. We were this year, COVID set us back, but we were looking to form a team in Atlanta. We're still working on that online, but so we just form relationships with them and let them know the Christian community is one of a lot of very thoughtful people, kind people, good people, and we're not a bunch of only people who are just boycotting or angry. because you put out that show. We also, we really appreciate good programming and positive programming and life affirming programming. And so that's what I do. But getting back to what you first said, Rick, about how the Lord, everything you do or you walk through in life, the Lord is shaping you to prepare you for the next assignment he's called you to. And I could not do what I'm doing right now without my many years in the Christian marketplace with Christian comedy and performing and producing records, etc. Without all those years producing television at the network level, all my years, we didn't even touch on it, in digital media. I produced 150 comedy videos for the digital space. I served as a consultant to many different, 5 different internet television companies. Without that background, and then as well as I'm an ordained pastor, I've been on 4 different pastoral staffs. So without all that, those things in the mix, I couldn't have the kinds of conversations that I'm holding with media leaders and filmmakers. And but what really excites me beyond meeting with the leaders of today is we also say we're a encouraging voice of experience to the next generation. Because Peggy and I, that's my wife, Peggy, we spoke at 16 universities last year in their film schools, really trying to encourage the next generation of Christian filmmakers who are entering the mainstream space, which is, I believe, where we're really going to change the game culturally by telling stories of faith in the mainstream space. And what we do, Rick, what the heart of our message is, and this applies to comedians too. You have to realize we are no longer living in a Christian nation. We are living in, we're no longer priests in Jerusalem. We're exiles in Babylon. And we have to look at our culture in America as a post-Christian culture. And you look at the book of Daniel, and the way Daniel succeeded and ascended to the top position, same Joseph too. The way he did it, it says in the book of Daniel 3 times that Daniel did it with excellence. He was excellent in what he did. But it also says that he was a man of strong Christian convictions. Well, not Christian, but Judeo, we'll say. Convictions where he wouldn't drink from the king's cup. He wouldn't bow to the idols. He wouldn't compromise his faith. And that's what I tell film students. That's what I tell comedians. You've heard me share this at the CCA. To tell comedians, you've got to be the best of the best, especially if you're going to play in the mainstream. Because this, Hollywood, man, where I live, the best of the best in the world come to Hollywood. So you're on a high level. And you've got to be a high level. You've got to be the best. And then you also don't drink from the king's cup, which I always look on in the media industry terms as fame and fortune. So many people think that I'll get into comedy or I'll get into this for fame and fortune. And man, those aren't really good mistresses. You don't want to go after that. There are countless big, famous, rich actors I talk to, or actresses who are so lonely and miserable, and they'd give anything to have a 42-year marriage like I have. They'd give their Oscar up for that. Don't go after that. Go after a life of purpose, a life of significance, where you're really making a name for your or a difference in somebody else's life. And it may not be in your act. It may be around the bar, in a club. I wasn't in Letterman, in Price is Right. I wasn't in front of the camera. I wasn't a writer on Letterman. Where I had my effect, my ministry, if you will, was off camera. It was over by the craft services, where a stage manager would come up and say, "Hey, I just found out my wife has cancer. Can you pray for her?" That's where the ministry takes place. We have to be among them. We're called to dwell among them, like Jesus did in John 1. that's the difference we can make. And I am so excited when I see these young filmmakers coming from the Christian University film programs. They are so good in their craft. They're making some really amazing films, but they love Jesus, and they see that I just want to bring the kingdom. I want to bring virtues of the kingdom in my script, in my storytelling, and I want to make a difference for God's kingdom. And it's encouraging. And then getting back specifically to the CCA, I told you all those years I was at Letterman. Well, I'll tell you, our good friend, Tim Hawkins, there wasn't a comedian on Letterman that's any better than Tim Hawkins or Michael Jr. or many others that are in the CCA. I am so proud of the quality of some of the top comedians at the CCA. They can hold their head high with anybody. And that's what we need to do. And that's one of the original tenets of the CCA, was that we would improve our craft to excellence.
A lot of good stuff in there.
Well, no, I just get passionate about this stuff because, I've been in the industry for 42 years. I see the difference someone can make who is just full on out for the Lord, but also, man, they are so good at their craft. God gives the gifting, but we just work hard on our talents. We just work really hard to make it the best we can make it. And you are one of those, Rick. I know how hard you work in shaping a joke, structuring it where you say it one night and it's like, that was good, but no, it can be better. And you tweak it. You maybe change an adjective, or you take a word out, or you pause at the right time, or you do all those little things that you do in comedy. And suddenly or you just have a different expression or gesture. And it just makes all the difference. But you're always tinkering to make it better and better and better. And that's what it takes.
What would you say to somebody who, and thanks for the compliment, but what would you say to somebody who thinks they're doing it in excellence, but they're not? Like, I'm not sure that you can break through that facade they have around what their act really is, but there's people that hit a certain level, whatever that level is, and they just stay there forever, and they expect better results than they're getting, but they're not putting in the work. Is there some kind of litmus test or challenge you would give those people to really see if they're as excellent in craft as they think they are?
Well, I think one thing you can do is go to a hostile audience. We have our safety net, especially when we're playing to church audiences who are so gracious. They won't be the like the American Idol where they'll tell you stink. They'll give you really positive stuff even when you're not. And it can kind of lull you into this idea that you're a lot better than you are, or maybe your specific, fan base who you can kind of do no wrong. They're just fans. But if you kind of go out of your comfort zone and play to a place that maybe doesn't care for you right off the bat, try that occasionally and just see how well you do. And that's, I'm very thankful for all those years in the comedy clubs. And I don't say this arrogantly, but when we finally became Christians and we started playing, we were good. And we weren't good because we're so great. We're good because we had worked on it for 7 years in the comedy clubs. And we, like you were talking, we had beer bottles thrown at us. We had stuff thrown at us. We learned real quick not to do rock shows. It's like when they came, we want to rock, when they want to hear rock music, the last thing they want is a comedy show where you got to listen. And so we learned real quick, don't do those. But, you learn all those things through, night after night, playing the clubs and sometimes drunken audiences and, for all those years. And that's why when the Lord did shift us to Christian comedy, and we were playing churches, and then we were playing universities, then we were playing, like Disneyland and, those kinds of places. And then we were playing the festivals where this is before big screens. And, we would be, 50,000 people at a Christian music festival in Pennsylvania or Florida. You had to be really good. And thankfully, we were already kind of had our chops together, by that time.
That's great. No, I agree. I think a challenging audience, or, go head to head in a showcase, try to surround yourself or get your foot in the door with higher caliber talent and see how you stack up. Definitely one way you want to kind of see where you stand. Now, what about, and this may be my last question, but the flip side of that, where you've got excellence, you know that you're stacking up well against others. For all the independent speakers or comedians listening, how do you promote that without sounding cocky?
That's really hard. And I talk to, in what I'm doing with Master Media, I talk to a lot of actors and actresses. And it's so hard because they struggle as Christians. It's like, man, I don't want to be self-promoting. I don't want it to be all about me. And I'm supposed to walk in humility before the Lord. And first of all, I think we don't want a false sense of meekness or whatever. We should be proud of the gifts that God has given us, the talents he's given us. We should also realize that, I worked hard in this, so I am good at what I do. And I can say that without arrogance. It's same as a doctor. A doctor studies for many years, and he can say, I'm a good doctor. And that's not arrogance. That's just a statement of fact. But here's the real dilemma with a comedian, an actor, an actress, a speaker, whatever. The product is you. You're not selling an iPhone. You're selling you. You are selling Rick Roberts, So you've got to promote yourself. So what you do is, especially if you have time for like an interview like we're doing, you walk in humility, you're humble, but also be very proud of, hey, I've got a show Saturday night. I think you're going to have a lot of fun. I think you're going to be excited about it. Because if you put yourself in what the audience is going to get out of it, as opposed to, I want your money, I want you to fill the place so the promoter has me back, that's self-serving. But you are saying, I want to serve the audience with the gifts that God has given me and that I have really worked hard to make good. So now you've shifted the tables. So I can very proudly get on, let's say you're doing a radio interview or a podcast, and say, hey, if you're not doing anything Saturday night, you should come. I think you're going to have a great time. I think you're really going to have a good time. I don't think you'll regret it. Tickets are only this. Hey, get out, bring the wife, bring the, whatever it might be. And I think you're going to really, really enjoy yourself. If you can say that in confidence where the listener is going, yeah, that might be fun. That might be fun, and make it about them, then it works. And I say the same thing to actors and actresses. When you go in for an audition, I know you're really you're really struggling because you don't want to make it all about you, but just tell the director, I think I can really bring a lot to this role. I think I'm good to work with. I think I have a good attitude. I'm really excited about this film. I'm really excited about this script. If you make it about them, man, I want to have that comedian. I want to have that speaker. I want to have that actor, and it's about them.
Focusing more on the results and the benefits of the performance as opposed to, look at me, I'm a great performer, helps them see it in the way that they want to see it in the first place. So you kind of answer their question before they even ask it and give them the answer that they're looking for. And it's truthful. It's not like you're trying to sell them something like, if it's not going to be a good show, I don't want 300 people to show up and find out it's not a good show, or 3,000. So you got to have the confidence in your abilities, but also really the perspective shift, almost like a business. You're just seeing it from the needs of the client, which is the audience.
Yes, it is. It is. It's always about them. It's always about how you can serve them. Let's go back to the scriptures. Jesus said, if you want to be great, be the servant of all. And it's the same way. It's even the same way in comedy. If you want to be great, be the servant of all. Serve your fans. Love your fans. Tell your people who don't know you, I think you're going to have a great time. Has it been a hard week? Come Saturday night, you're going to laugh. I think you're going to have a good time. Make it all about them. And you look at superstars, like a Garth Brooks. Garth Brooks isn't the greatest singer in the world, but he loves his audience maybe better than anybody. And he gives his audience the greatest time. And he's one of the biggest superstars of all time, because he's serving his fans. And he hangs out. There's legendary stories of how he'll sit, hang out afterwards till 2 a.m. signing autographs, and make it about your audience.
Great. And lastly, I just want to let people know, I think they've listened this far, they enjoyed the conversation. You have conversations with lots of people in Hollywood on your Life Off-Screen web series and podcast with your wife, Peggy, who you've mentioned a few times. I think people will get a lot out of dialing up some of those on YouTube and checking them out. I just watched this morning the one with Tim Hawkins. I thought you guys, you're natural friends, so you have a lot of chemistry anyway, but I just thought the conversation was good and fluid and, inspiring on a lot of elements, and also just intriguing, digging in somebody's career that's had a lot of success and how do they handle that. I thought Tim had some great perspectives on that as well. But do you have another favorite episode outside of Tim and his wife?
Yeah, well, man, all of them. We have had so much fun. It's called Life Off Screen because we focus more on their life off screen. And we talk to a lot of producers, screenwriters, actors, musicians, comedians. In Tim's case, we also recently had one of our last episodes, Corey Edwards and his wife, Vicky. Corey is a stand-up, but he's also a film producer. He did Hoodwinked, which was a huge hit, animated comedy. So we've really enjoyed all of it. But what is so fun about it is their spouse joins them. And so you get to talk about not only the craft, we did, like you mentioned with Tim, we talked about comedy and the craft, life on the road, but you get also kind of pull the curtain behind, the man behind the curtain, so to speak, and, talk about how you raise kids, how you, keep your marriage going while you're on the road a lot and all these different things. So, but there's just I don't know, it's hard to pick. I've had so many fun ones. One of my favorites, in fact, it was so good, we made it a 2-parter, was with Squire Rushnell and his wife, Louise Duarte. And they're both really kind of rock stars in the industry. Squire, he's a TV producer, and he was also a network executive, but he created Schoolhouse Rock, which we all grew up with, or your generation grew up with. I'm a little bit older than that, but my kids listened to Schoolhouse Rock, and so he was fabulous guest. He talked a lot. But the other one, my old friend Louise Duarte, who I know way back, she did Isaac Airfree had a TV show for a while called The Isaac Air Show, and it was a Saturday Night Live format, and she was one of our players. Oh. And Louise is a impressionist. She's been on Hollywood Squares and countless other shows. And her idol is Carol Burnett, and she does an impeccable Carol Burnett. Well, 15 years ago, Harvey Korman and Tim Conway wanted to do a kind of like a Carol Burnett touring show. They wanted to do a live show, but they needed a Carol Burnett because Carol wasn't going to tour with them. And they did auditions, and they hired Louise Duarte. So Louise Duarte shares stories of 15 years on the road with Tim Conway and Harvey Korman. And so that was a great episode. So Squire Rushnell and his wife, Louise Duarte.
That sounds great, because Carol Burnett's definitely one of my favorites too. So anybody that stepped into her shoes in any kind of way and pulled that off with those two guys, that's got to be something.
Do you have time for a quick story about Carol Burnett?
Absolutely.
Carol Burnett did the Carol Burnett show on Studio 33, which is the same studio I did Price is Right on. They would roll the set pieces out for Price is Right and roll in Carol Burnett. Now, Carol Burnett was before I started at CBS, but still she hung out. She was at CBS a lot. And in fact, I was supervised a couple of her reunion shows. she did, where she brought in the whole gang, Vicki Lawrence and Lyle Wagner and everybody. But one time I had these friends visiting me on The Price is Right from Colorado. And they called me and said, can you give me a tour of CBS? So I did. I took them, it's 4-story building. I took them to every studio, every makeup room, every nook and cranny of the entire building. And then I'm walking into the elevator to say goodbye. And they point over to this corner and they go, hey, what are those 2 rooms over there? And I said, oh, those are just rehearsal halls. What they are is they're blank 4 walls, nothing's in them, and they're just cedar block walls, and people go in there and they rehearse, and that's it. There's nothing to see. And they said, well, could you show them to us? This way when we go home, we can say we literally saw everything.
Right.
And I said, sure, I'll do that. So as we're walking over there to the rehearsal halls, Janelle, the wife, she says, Dan, do you see a lot of stars around here? I said, well, of course. It's a working studio. I see people all the time. And she goes, have you ever seen Carol Burnett? And I said, oh, yeah, Carol's here an awful lot. She's here a lot. So we get to the doors. I barge into this rehearsal hall, and there's Carol Burnett, Tim Conway, Bob Mackey, who does her gowns, and the director. His name was Bob, the director. And I just barged in on him. And I start to close it. I go, I am so sorry. And Carol Burnett goes, come in. She calls us in. She pulls out 3 folding chairs. And she says, here, sit. We're going to do a sketch for you, me and Tim. Tell us if you think it's funny. They did this sketch. Of course. I mean, we are practically wetting our pants. Right. Tim Conway is one of the funniest people on the planet, and Carol Burnett is the consummate pro. She can do anything. And to see them, and we're like 6 feet away, it was unbelievable. But my point is, she was so kind and so humble. And here, think of it, Rick. She's you can't get higher than Carol Burnett on the comedy food chain, and she still wanted that feedback. She's still going back to what we were saying about excellence. She was still saying, is this funny? Because as you know, you write a joke, but I always say with comedy, it's not funny till somebody laughs. We can sit with pen and paper and go, oh, that's killer. That's gold. That is so funny. But it's not funny until somebody laughs at it. And Carol Burnett, at such a high level of accomplishment, she's still doing that. She's still saying, was that funny? Was that funny? And wow, I learned a lot that afternoon, as well as just how kind she was.
I mean, what a great way to wrap up today, man. I would love to have been there to get that private performance from somebody at such a high caliber. And I'm sure your friends on the way out were like, he probably planned that. He probably had her.
Yeah, right. That's what my friends did think.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your time. And if anybody wants to find out more about Dan, I'll have all the information in the show notes. And definitely check out his web series as well. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Rick. It's totally my pleasure. I've really enjoyed being with you.
What did I tell you? Some great stories in there. I love David Letterman. I love Bob Barker, and I love Carol Burnett. So just to hear some stories about him interacting with those folks and just the behind the scenes of working on a TV set like that. He did a couple of really cool jobs, and hanging out with Rupert from David Letterman over at the Hello Deli. How cool is that? I don't know if y'all young folks know what I'm talking about, but Rupert, he was the man on David Letterman. Would always come over with a big old sandwich, and David stop in there and ask some questions, or have Rupert do some man on the street stuff. Always funny. Anyway, that's Dan Rupple. I'll link to his podcast, his web series. I guess it's kind of both, so you can listen to it or watch it however you like. I'll link to all that in the show notes. And you can always find out more about all these episodes at schooloflaughs.com. And by the way, I'm just going to say this because I don't know if people realize this. The website isn't just a place where I host a podcast. The podcast does live there, but there is so many episodes of the podcast that you can search through. Like you can go to the search tool on the website from the homepage and search any comedy topic, whether it's writing, performing, the business of comedy, stage fright, writing tips. You can search like dry bar comedians or David Letterman comics. Anything like that will pull up the corresponding episodes, and then you know exactly which ones to listen to get the answer to some of your most frequently asked questions. So jump on there, and while you're on there, you can sign up for the Insider Tip Sheet, which goes out monthly with the recaps from the podcast and sometimes some extra goodies in there for you, like that goals tracker we did this year and last year and the year before and the year before that. All right. Hey, again, thanks to Shell Baxter for supporting us through Patreon. And that's going to be it for this one. You guys stay safe and stay funny. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the School of Laughs podcast. If you'd like to hear more School of Laughs podcasts, you can find them on iTunes and Stitcher.com. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. For information on upcoming live and online classes, visit schooloflaughs.com. Until next time, stay tuned, stay focused, and stay funny.